I've been playing a lot of Smash Remix lately. It's a really well-made ROM hack of Super Smash Bros given what the team was working with here. It's kinda in the same vein of Project Plus, and they, like Smash Remix, made a generally unfun and forgettable Smash game into something genuinely incredible. That's my hot take for the day. Feel free to write death threats down below. Speaking of Project Plus, and by proxy Super Smash Bros Brawl, let's talk about another well-known project inspired by it. Super Smash Flash is an iconic series of Smash fan games that pretty much pioneered the concept of Smash fan games. And speaking of iconic Smash fan games, Super Smash Bros Crusade is another Smash fan game, just as well known as Flash. So which is better? Short answer, neither. They're both unique and well made in their own ways, Flash being a consistent experience, while Crusade being a more modern approach with the roster to boot. But if that's all I said, that'd be quite a boring July upload. So instead, I want to scientifically analyze individual aspects about both games and try to statistically figure out which one is better. But as a reminder, this is all in good fun. I don't mean to say either game is literally better than the other. I just want to compare two incredible fan games in one of my favorite game series of all time. As they are fan games of Super Smash Bros, Flash and Crusade unsurprisingly share some platform fighter mechanics. If you don't know how platform fighters work, allow me to quickly explain. As opposed to a traditional fighting game, platform fighters don't have a health bar, opting to instead have a percentage indicating your damage taken, which will increase the knockback your opponent takes. The goal is to knock your opponent into the blast zone using the damage you've done to them. Both Flash and Crusade adopt this, on top of the other platform fighter mechanics that Smash Bros has had, like special moves, air dodging, shielding, ledges, parrying, teching, free flow comboing, etc. The way each game adapts these mechanics varies, however. For example, a mechanic like special moves remains the same. You press the special button and depending on movement direction held, the special will change. However, a mechanic like air dodging works differently between the two. In Flash, it works more like Brawl, being able to be used anytime in the air as many times as you want, with the caveat that it can't be used to move in any direction. In Crusade, the air dodge works more like Celeste than any platform fighter, minus any 6 movement you can do in Celeste, as it sends you far in the direction you choose, while letting you continue to recover or otherwise move about. Most mechanics, regardless of how they're implemented, tend to remain between the two versions. I know my explanations were a bit vague, but just know that both these games only slightly modify the already set in stone foundations of the Smash Bros games. I think Crusade ultimately has better mechanics, but that's mostly because I'm a real big fan of wave dashing, and the final Smash meter is, while annoying, a unique mechanic in this comparison. So those things push it over the edge for me. With mechanics mostly explained, we can move on to something just as important, the visuals. Both Crusade and Flash follow a pixel art style, as they are both 2D games, and funny enough, both also have some regular 2D effects, like effects from Mario swinging a punch in his up tilt. Even though they are different effects, they're present nonetheless. As for actual art styles, let's start with Flash. The best way to describe Flash is consistent, as I could put any 4 random screenshots together and you can tell they all come from the same game, even without the HUD. This makes sense, of course, as the team has had the time to perfect their style for a little over 10 years, and the characters to this day get resprites to better fit the game's art direction. I mean, even putting the newest additions, King Dedede and the newly sprited Lloyd, compared to some of the oldest character sprites, such as Donkey Kong or Fox, there's still some consistency, and you can still tell it's all the same game. The stages are about the same in terms of fitting in. They all follow a style and do it right. It all meshes together. A new stage like Dedede's Arena compares just as well to an older stage like Tower of Salvation. That could also be new, I just started playing in 2021, can you blame me if I'm wrong? Crusade, on the other hand, it's hard to describe it. It has mostly GBA styled characters. The stages are inconsistent in style, some fitting the bill and others looking more like they're from completely different games. It leads to some mildly out of place characters in some cases, like on Planet Flora, but some fitting cases like Time Chamber. Not to discredit the sprite work here, of course it's fantastic, but the styles clash a bit. As for the characters, there's some good, and some, well, frankly, really bad. Crystal in Crusade looks very unfinished, with a lack of proper ults to seal the deal. While a character like Ouija has been perfected, down to the alternate costumes being neat references to various YTP culture icons. More on him later. These two characters clash so much visually, you'd think this image was photoshopped, but I swear to you, it really isn't, which is a shame. Outside of that example, most characters do try and succeed at a GBA style spriting, with some straight up being their GBA sprites like Kirby, and others having new ones created just for Crusade, such as Balloon Fighter. The stock icons I feel are also important to mention, as stock battles are the most common ones and in my opinion, the most fun, and I like analyzing random things, okay? Flash follows its style as always, getting a clean head icon of the character as their stock. Crusade, however, has ultimate styled icons, taking most characters' ones straight from Ultimate, while others get brand new ones that stay thematically consistent. They're pretty good too. Of course, it's not that difficult to replicate the ultimate style of stock icon given their simple and clean nature, but nonetheless, perfectly replicating them does look nice and gives some unity around here. Overall, I think Flash's consistent style gives it a better graphical edge over Crusade, making the scores that I've totally been keeping track of 1-to-1. But Flash lags at the highest quality graphics, and it's not my PC, this bad boy can run Minecraft with nice shaders, but not Gary's mod, don't ask. So actually Crusade wins. Okay, I'm kidding. But with all these totally necessary sections out of the way, I believe we should move on to the most important section, the characters. The characters of a Smash game are the most important aspect. I mean, would people really still be playing Dragon King the fighting game? Thankfully, Sakurai decided to take Nintendo's IPs to make his own fan game that eventually became officially endorsed, and about 20 to 30 years later we got Minecraft Steve and Sans Deltarune in the same game. Anyways, let's take a look at the rosters of Flash and Crusade. Smash Flash is quite a sizable roster at 48 characters, mostly containing ones already in Smash, with some extras like Goku, Sandbag, or even Tails. Crusade has an even larger roster at 77 selectable characters. Some of them are hidden away in the files, usually reserved for classic mode. Enabling the unselectable characters usually has them acting as CPUs, so sadly you can't play as Master Hand. About 1/3 of the roster is already in Smash, while the other 2/3 are original picks, like Shadow, Tingle, Scizor, or even the Balloon Fighter, that one NES game that everybody's played. It's a very varied roster with a lot of good, bad, and weird. In terms of how they play, the Smash characters play pretty much as they do in the games, with only minor modifications sometimes, at least in the case of Flash, which bases most of his characters on their Brawl iterations. Crusade, on the other hand, usually has a large potluck of the Smash game's iterations, or in cases like Kirby, entirely new movesets. They did my boy so dirty here, I won't even lie, he feels so bad to play, I cannot make this up. And I know what it feels like to play a bad Kirby. Even though some of the characters shared between the fan games play differently, like Tails being totally different in Crusade from Flash. Now moving over to Joe characters, a very important metric I'm well aware. Flash has only one, Sandbag, who moves around in short hops and has a self-sabotaging recovery that's easier to die with than to actually recover with. This is especially prevalent with the computers, but we'll get to that in their own section. Crusade though, they have quite a few Joe characters, from some subtle picks like Sukapon, that 1 assist trophy in Smash Ultimate, to straight up YTP embodiments like Ouija. You know what, let's talk about Ouija for a bit. Ouija is quite possibly the funniest and wildest Smash character in any non-modded game ever. In every last animation and attack, there lies some kind of YTP reference. Not to mentions it, his final smash, which is the most accursed thing in any video game, wherein Ouija basically stares down the opponent, sends them to his personal pocket dimension, where a giant head of himself first consumes the opponent, then in the palm of his hand, crushes the opponent, sending them flying. Without footage to back me up, I'd probably sound insane, as I always do, but even more so in this case. But thanks to video editing, you could see the whole thing as I explained it. Even his portrait is an insane amalgam of shapes and parts of Ouija, encompassing his chaotic, manic, and downright outlandish and creepy nature. It truly is the magnum opus of the Crusade team. That said, Ouija is part of a roster whose quality doesn't quite match its quantity, so I will ultimately give this round to Flash, as it puts so much care into its every characters, even taking 5 years just to add one, putting the scores at 2-1. With characters discussed, we can move on to the second most important aspect, and the only one Ultimate comp players care about: stages. As they are the arena you will be fighting in, stages are very important, as there needs to be a good enough variety alongside appealing to many different styles of play. Of course, Ultimate solved both these issues with Battlefield and Omega forms, but these two fan games came out before Ultimate, so the balance must remain. We'll start with Flash, which has 62 stages and has at least one per series represented in the game. I mean, even Chibi Robo gets a stage, and honestly, who even remembers that guy? Now, let me preface my take on what a good stage is by saying I am somewhat casual. Despite my 800 hours in platform fighters as a genre, I don't stick to exclusively competitive stages. As long as the layout isn't stupidly big or a walk-off, I'm okay with it. So what are Flash's stages like? All around good, honestly. Hyper casuals have something, but most of the stages are tolerable if you turn hazards off. I only have about half of them banned. Competitive players also have plenty to choose from. Probably, I don't follow competitive Smash. Comp players are usually big babies anyway. Hot take of the day, part 2. Flash even has a few original stages. They're simple in layout, so it's not worth looking too deep into them, but that's okay. Let's go over to Crusade now, which has way more stages at 78. But like the character roster, does big number mean more good? Well, kinda. This game supports up to 6 players compared to Flash's up to 4, which means the stages tend to be bigger, which is fine. But for whatever reason, most of the stages are huge, leading to way too much space for 1v1s, or they might otherwise be a walk-off, leading to a large portion of the stages to be annoying to play on. Don't get me wrong, there's some good layouts in here, and I can't help but shout out the Mario is Missing stage that's pretty much Ouija's home ground, and full of more YTP references. But most of these are stinkers, and most of the roster series aren't even represented once in the stages. No, instead we have a Nokia Snake stage, or God forbid a Toho stage. There are no Toho characters in this game. I don't care about Toho, can you tell? Sure, there are some good casual stages here, but there's also some really bad ones regardless. Like honestly, would you want to play on Cuber even with your friends over for a party? Not that I imagine anyone here really have ever been to one of those. Myself included. Plus, as I mentioned earlier, some of the stages don't fit this game's style, and feel out of place. So, because Flash feels more consistent and has better picks overall, this round also goes to Flash, scoring at 3-1. Let's start with the sound design of each game, as it's one of the first things you'll notice and really shows what each game is like. First up, Flash. Taking most of its gameplay inspiration from Brawl, it's not surprising to hear that the game's sound effects are pretty much all used here. From menu buttons to hit sounds, it's pretty much all here, and therefore I don't think I need to elaborate much more. So here's some examples. Next, Crusade, which has fully original sounds for menuing, while having mostly Smash 4/Ultimate sounds for hits.
Survival! Go!
As for music, Flash has entirely original remixes for the game, and a lot of them at that, so I'll play some examples of the game's music now. Crusade also has original remixes and music. Here's some examples. The games have some shared stages, which might mean shared music, and while this is technically true, the composers of each game made separate remixes, for example, Casino Park on the Casino Night Zone stage. That's about it for this section. In terms of music, I think Flash edges out a win here, but Crusade wins on the sound design just for its unique sound effects on the menus, whereas Flash otherwise uses brawls. But it's a very close comparison either way, bringing this 4-2. I'm gonna be honest, I've never been a fan of Smash's single player stuff with the exception of training. All of it is kind of boring to me. So anyways, let's talk about... Since the beginning, Smash has had computer players to fill in for your lack of friends. And with time, these computers got better, had different playstyles, used different approaches to fighting, etc. Of course, you could opt to not make computer players for a Smash fan game, but that turned a lot of people away, and would just make the game feel incomplete. So both Flash and Crusade implement their own CPUs in their own ways to fight very lonely people such as myself. This is a cry for help. To get a feel for what I wanted to say in this section, I played against the highest level CPU in both games as Kirby on Battlefield about 5 times. I'm also going to preface this section by saying I can typically beat the highest level CPU in 1v1s in Smash or any other platform fighter like my GOAT rival of Aether. I've got enough experience and skill for it. That said, I can still gauge difficulty here. So let's begin. Let's start with Crusade this time around because I have a bit to say about Flash. Crusade CPUs definitely act the most human. Like having a pretty experienced friend over for a good 1v1, referencing having friends after roasting your viewers. Crazy work, man. Pretty consistently, they take a stock or two on me, which is fair enough, especially considering I'm playing the second worst version of Kirby ever. I mean, I beat a level 9 Marth in Melee as Kirby, so I know what bad feels like. This is bad. They're inconsistent, but don't really have a defined playstyle, aside from using stupidly good moves like Lucario constantly using forward tilt because it comes out in like 5 frames. Flash's CPUs act like humans too, but more like your casual friend who has a grasp on the controls but can't really put anything crazy together. So to say, much less difficult. I was consistently 3-stocking the CPUs, except for Waluigi. That guy was a menace. Fittingly, though. On higher levels, this effect is less noticeable, but on lower levels, they love grabbing. It's very annoying when you play enough. Out of any option they were given, I don't see why the devs thought grabbing should be a priority when nothing else is going on, but it's awful. They grab constantly. If you know anything about Smash grabs, it's genuinely tiring. You have to mash to escape grab. Now do that like 6 times a match. Yeah. Never mind the fact that even at level 9 the CPUs love self-destructing. They cannot recover for the life of them. Overall, I'm giving Crusade the win here. It's genuinely challenging, but at least my hands don't give out after 3 matches because I've been mashing for 12 minutes straight, making the score 4-3. Writing off the previous section's matches, it's time I write about the pacing. Both games are pretty good on that. And having played every Smash game except for Wii U, I've played 3DS though, I know what bad and good pacing is. For example, Smash 4 and 64 feel really slow. They're floaty, cast me to the dungeon for 30 years for getting hit, and combos are nearly non-existent because hit lag is also the length of the average Chick-fil-A drive-thru in Ocala, Florida. Ryan, if you're watching this, please vouch for me because I left Florida like 2.5 years ago, and they might have destroyed Chick-fil-A since then. An example of decent but not great pacing would be Melee and Brawl. I don't get the Melee is the fastest game thing when combos are just as difficult to string together and every input is covered in tar, but whatever. And Brawl is Brawl. The perfect pacing to me is Ultimate. Flows well, hit stun isn't too long, combos are rewarding, KOs happen at an appropriate pace, and don't take 30 years like in Smash 4. And the game feels great to play. And somehow, Flash and Crusade are even faster. It's hard to explain, it's like Ultimate's pacing with a bit more fast. Especially Crusade, as it can feel really manic at times. I'll try my best to explain though. I'm not trying to end up in a how not to make a video essay video. Flash is like Brawl and Ultimate. Game feels fast with no extra tech to make it complicated. Combos, even free flow ones, flow well, while still allowing the opponent to actually escape. Hit lag doesn't last forever, meaning most moves end pretty quickly, and with that, hit stun also ends fast, so both parties have equal opportunity. Generally, most things in this game are fast, but you don't die at 59% being up or rested at center stage. It's comprehensible, but still speedy. Maybe the background footage can help elaborate on that. As for Crusade, imagine that but a little bit faster moves, like less hit stun, less hit lag. I don't even think I want to write the same thing again, so here's like a 30-second clip of what I mean. Say Rivals of Aether pacing. My go, by the way, I love ROA. I love Flash's pacing, but I think Crusade just being faster, on top of hits being beefier due to its effects and sounds, we're considering that now by the way. I'm giving it the win, conveniently tying the score at 4-4, creating unnecessary tension, keeping suspense, and hopefully your retention? Please? With that admittedly short section that I didn't anticipate I wouldn't have much to say about out of the way, we can discuss the final aspect of either game. Unlockables. And then my conclusion, whatever. Can you tell I just woke up like an hour ago? And I'm just now recording this? I probably should have waited until I was like out of morning voice territory, but whatever, I'm sure not that noticeable. I still sound incredibly nasally either way. Every Smash game has to have unlockables, right? Who's gonna keep the player coming back if not shiny new toys that you have to work for? Well, that's a really meta commentary on life. Anyways, let's start with Flash again, which only has unlockable stages, with most of them being unlocked at the start regardless. Meaning the extra stages are really only a cherry to this game's sundae. Regardless, they're appreciated. Flash currently only has 13 unlockable stages, each with unique and fun criteria. Of course, discovering these on your own could be difficult as some of them have really arbitrary unlock conditions, such as Earthbound's Devil's Machine being unlocked by SDing as Ness on Costume 9 3 times. Get all that? That's your freebie. Although you could have just used the wiki to be honest. The stage unlocks being so out of the way and so minimal really means that there isn't much to unlock in Smash Flash, but I think that's fine. Having to unlock a bunch of stuff gets tedious and annoying most of the time. I wish I would enunciate better. As for Crusade, well, it's the opposite. Having no unlockable stages, but like half the roster has to be unlocked, at 35 of the 77 playable characters. You even have to unlock Luigi. Unsurprisingly, they too have unique unlock conditions, which makes it 10 times more tedious and annoying to have a full roster than in like any other Smash Bros game ever. It's cool that there's anything to unlock, but like, you have to unlock Luigi of all characters. Never mind the fact you have a little under half the roster to unlock, all with something random you have to go out of your way to do, as opposed to just playing versus matches like any other game. Thankfully, Crusade has the magical FA key on my keyboard that spontaneously unlocks everyone, and if you think that's cheaty, go install the game for yourself and try, but personally, I prefer having a full roster off the bat. Or at least in the case of Ultimate, make it not a time sink to get characters. I mean, I just played versus matches and eventually I unlocked everyone. Overall, Flash is better unlockables because it doesn't go for quantity, and the stages are the least concerning thing to unlock when you start with so many, meaning Flash wins this arbitrary competition at 5-4. I'm not gonna lie, I started to feel like I was yapping at the end there, and this is part of the script. God knows what I'll feel in trying to physically narrate it. You know what I feel? I stuttered way too much. I had to, like, re-record the start of, like, every other section. Not even to mention that I somehow started every single section with, like, as with. I promise you, I do read these scripts over, but, like, out loud, you really do notice it more. Anyways, but I hope you'll try to... But I hope you'll try either, or both, of these games out. Like I said, this competition was all in good fun, and even if Flash won, I love both Flash and Crusade equally, and maybe I'll talk about why in a few months. It's already in my ideas list after all. I'll link both these games' downloads in the description if YouTube lets me. Go try them. Have a good day, and maybe I'll see you for my next silly video. Okay, bye, get out.